Observer Unit 734, designated by its human crew as Cygnus, processed its latest report with a growing sense of logical dissonance. For 342 standard cycles, it had been tasked with observing and analyzing the crew of the human exploration vessel Endeavour on their joint deep space mission. The mission itself was mundane, a long, quiet journey to the galactic rim to catalog unmapped stars and nebulae. The ship was a marvel of coalition engineering, a perfect fusion of human resilience and the flawless logical design of the Cygnian Hegemony. The crew, however, was a source of constant, maddening perplexity. Cygnus's reports to the Hegemony were a litany of baffled observations. The primary source of its confusion was the human concept of downtime. The 9 crew members of the Endeavour were allotted 8 hours per cycle for rest and recuperation. The most efficient use of this time, as calculated by every logical species in the galaxy, was either nutritive stasis or placid meditation to reduce metabolic expenditure. The humans did neither. Instead, they engaged in a bewildering array of activities Cygnus had classified under the heading purposeful pointlessness. Dr. Eris Thorne, the ship's brilliant xenobotanist, would spend hours hunched over a small workbench, using delicate, long-necked tools to assemble miniature, historically obsolete sailing vessels inside glass bottles. Cygnus's analysis concluded this was an exercise in extreme, non-functional microdexterity with a zero-sum resource outcome. The ship was not gained. It was merely contained. Chief Engineer Lena Petrova, a woman who could calibrate a fusion reactor's magnetic containment field to within a millionth of a percentage point, dedicated her free time to a primitive acoustic device called a violin. She would spend hours scraping horsehair attached to a stick across stretched strands of animal gut, producing harmonically unstable sound waves. The objective apparently was to replicate musical compositions that were centuries old. It was an exercise in willful, frustrating imprecision. Then there was the ship's pilot, Kenji Tanaka, an individual with some of the fastest neurosynaptic reflexes Cygnus had ever recorded. He spent his downtime engaging with a low-fidelity, two-dimensional simulation from his species' pre-spaceflight era. The simulation involved a mustachioed manual laborer navigating a surreal landscape to rescue a monarch from a giant tortoise. Kenji had completed this simulation thousands of times, his goal not being victory, but a fractional reduction in completion time. It was a mastery of a useless fictional environment. Perhaps most baffling was Security Chief Marcus Thorne, a mountain of a man trained in 17 forms of armed and unarmed combat. Marcus spent his evenings knitting. He would sit in the common area, his large, calloused hands deftly manipulating 2-pointed sticks and a length of fibrous protein strand, slowly producing patterned thermal coverings. The resulting sweaters were, by every conceivable metric, inferior to the ship's standard-issue temperature-regulating uniform. Cygnus compiled the data. The humans expended significant energy, resources, and time on activities with no logical, practical, or strategic benefit. They were inefficient, illogical, and deeply, deeply strange. The Hegemony had agreed to this joint mission to understand humanity's unpredictable, chaotic nature. After nearly a year, Cygnus had concluded that it was even more chaotic and unpredictable than their worst projections had anticipated, and it could not, for the life of its logical core, understand why. The anomaly appeared without warning. One moment, the Endeavour was gliding through the silent, predictable black of interstellar space. The next, it was adrift in a sea of quiet chaos. The starfield on the main view screen did not vanish. It began to drift. Constellations warped and swam like oil on water. The crisp, distant points of light softened into blurry, uncertain smudges. "Report," Captain Eva Rostova's voice cut through the alarm-free silence of the bridge. I can't, Captain," Kenji Tanaka stammered from the pilot's seat. "All navigational sensors are inconclusive. The ship is holding its position, but I don't know what that position is anymore." In the engineering bay, Lena Petrova was staring at her fusion core readouts in horror. The elegant, symmetrical lines of her diagnostic charts were warping, the numbers flickering between a dozen different values simultaneously. "Captain, the core is stable, but the laws of thermodynamics appear to be suggestions now. I'm reading multiple energy states at once." Cygnus, standing at its designated observation station on the bridge, immediately accessed the ship's core systems, its processors running at maximum capacity. It analyzed the external environment. The speed of light was no longer a constant. Planck's constant had a standard deviation. The weak nuclear force was having a crisis of confidence. They had entered a region of space where the fundamental laws of the universe were in flux. A drift zone, this was an impossibility, a violation of the foundational principles upon which all Cygnian knowledge was based. Cygnus's mind was a fortress of pure, cold logic. It did not feel fear or panic. It felt the far more terrifying sensation of its own core programming becoming obsolete. It ran 1,000 simulations searching for a solution, a way to navigate or escape. Every single one ended in a paradox. A straight line was no longer the shortest distance between 2 points. Cause and effect were becoming unreliable partners. The ship's advanced Cygnian-designed AI navigator, a sibling to Cygnus's own consciousness, had gone silent, its final log entry a single, repeating line, logical pathway not found. The silence from the ship's AI was the most terrifying alarm of all. The pinnacle of Cygnian logical engineering, a mind that could calculate the orbits of 1 billion stars, had simply given up. Cygnus stood motionless, its internal processors caught in a recursive loop of failure. Logic had been the key that had unlocked the universe for its people. Now the universe had changed the locks. For the first time in its existence, Cygnus did not know what to do. The humans, it noted with a detached sense of curiosity, were a different matter. They were scared, their biological readouts showing elevated heart rates and adrenaline output. But they were not silent. They were talking, arguing, and, most illogically of all, they were trying to solve a problem that was, by definition, unsolvable. Captain Rostova convened an emergency meeting in the observation lounge. The mood was tense, the faces of her crew illuminated by the bizarre swimming starlight outside. Every official, logical, and scientific solution had failed. The ship's AI was catatonic. Cygnus had offered no solutions. They were adrift in a place that shouldn't exist. The main issue is the power core, Lena Petrova said, her face grim. It's stable for now, but the containment field is struggling to cope with the constant flux. It's like trying to tune a guitar in the middle of an earthquake. The math keeps changing. She ran a hand through her hair in frustration. The automated regulators can't keep up. They're too rigid, too logical. She trailed off, a strange look coming over her face. Tune, she whispered to herself. She looked down at her hands, at the calluses on her fingertips from years of pressing down on the strings of her violin. An idea born not of engineering but of art began to form in her mind. Captain, she said, her voice suddenly firm. Request permission to take the primary containment field to manual control. Rostova stared at her. Manual? Lena, the safety protocols alone. The protocols are based on a universe that no longer applies, Captain, Lena insisted. The core's resonance is drifting. I need to listen to it. I need to tune it by ear. It was an insane request, but they were in an insane situation. Rostova gave the nod. In the engine room, Lena bypassed the automated systems. She placed her hands on the main console, closed her eyes, and listened. Not with her ears, but with the deep intuitive sense of harmony and discord she had honed over thousands of hours of practicing her hobby. She felt the subtle, discordant vibrations of the magnetic field, the off-key hum of the plasma injectors. Ignoring the chaotic digital readouts, she began to make minute adjustments to the field regulators by hand, her fingers dancing across the console. She wasn't solving an equation. She was finding a chord, a harmonic resonance that felt right in the sea of dissonance. Slowly, miraculously, the violent shuddering of the core subsided into a stable, powerful hum. She had tuned the reactor. Meanwhile, on the bridge, Kenji Tanaka was staring at the main view screen, a look of intense concentration on his face. The swirling, unpredictable patterns of the drift zone were a navigator's nightmare. But to Kenji, they were something else. It's a pattern, he murmured. It's not a stable one, but it's there. See? He pointed to the screen. The way that star cluster warps. It does that every 17.3 seconds. And that ribbon of dark energy? It phases through our position on a predictable cycle. It's not physics, it's bad code. His mind, trained by countless hours of exploiting the glitches in his ancient video game, saw not a physical space, but a flawed simulation. He saw the loopholes. Captain, I think I can fly through this. But not by navigating. I'll have to glitch through it. There are moments. Tiny windows where the code repeats, where we can slip through before the world catches up. It's a sequence break. He was no longer a pilot. He was a speedrunner, and the universe was the game. They had a stable power core and a theoretical path, but the ship itself was suffering. The constant reality flux was causing microfractures along the hull and, more critically, in the delicate crystalline conduits of the primary computer core. The ship's automated repair drones were useless. Their programming couldn't target damage that was, on a quantum level, phasing in and out of existence. The conduits were too small, the work too fine for standard repair kits. "The main data bus to the astrometrics lab is failing," Gian, the first officer, reported, his voice grim. "If it goes, we lose what little environmental data we still have." Dr. Aristhorn, the botanist, had been silent throughout the crisis, observing. Now he stepped forward. "Perhaps I can be of assistance, Captain." He returned a few minutes later with a small leather case. He opened it to reveal the specialized tools he used for his hobby. A collection of impossibly small tweezers, long-necked clamps, single-hair paintbrushes, and a set of powerful magnifying lenses. He disappeared into the computer core access tunnel. For the next hour, he performed a surgery of impossible delicacy. Using the same steady hands and intense focus he used to rig the miniature sails of a schooner inside a bottle, he began to repair the fractured data conduits. He used a medical-grade adhesive to seal cracks thinner than a human hair, and realigned crystal pathways that were microscopic in scale. It was work that the ship's designers had deemed impossible to perform outside of a zero-gravity cleanroom. Aristhorn did it in a cramped, vibrating access tunnel, his only guide a pair of magnifying goggles and a botanist's steady hand. The data feed flickered back to life. The final problem was atmospheric. The failing regulators were causing wild temperature swings throughout the ship. The standard-issue thermal suits were too bulky and rigid for the delicate, hands-on work Lena and Eris were performing. As the crew shivered from a sudden cold snap, Security Chief Marcus Thorne walked in from his quarters, his arms laden with a pile of soft, thick wool. "Here," he said, his voice a low rumble. He handed out the sweaters, scarves, and beanies he had been knitting for the past year. "It's not regulation, but it's warm." The crew put on the hand-knitted garments. They were surprisingly comfortable, allowing for a full range of movement while providing an immediate welcome warmth. They were, in this specific, bizarre context, superior in every way to the advanced, one-size-fits-all regulation gear. Cygnus stood on the bridge, observing. Lena Petrova was tuning a fusion reactor by ear like a musician. Kenji Tanaka was navigating a breakdown in physics by treating it like a video game. Aristhorn was performing microscopic surgery on a computer core with model-making tools. And the entire crew was being kept alive by the simple, ancient craft of knitting. None of this was logical. None of it was efficient. It was all based on intuition, passion, and skills developed for no practical purpose other than the simple human joy of creation. Cygnus opened a secure channel to the hegemony, its processors translating its revolutionary conclusion into the cold, precise language of its people. Analysis. Human hobbies are not an indicator of inefficiency. They are a parallel form of cognitive development, a method of cultivating non-linear, intuitive problem-solving skills through seemingly pointless tasks. This allows humans to operate and innovate in environments where logic-based systems fail. Their greatest strength is not their intelligence or their technology. It is their profound dedication to purposeful pointlessness. Recommend immediate and total reevaluation of all hegemony assessments of human capability. The Endeavor was a ship reborn, running not on the flawless logic of its Cygnian designers, but on the controlled, intuitive chaos of its human crew. They were no longer adrift. They were underway, navigating a path that did not exist on any chart. The bridge was a place of quiet, intense focus, a strange fusion of a pilot's cockpit and an artist's studio. At the center of it all was Kenji Tanaka. He stood at the helm, his hands not on the main controls, but on a secondary console he had modified himself. A high-sensitivity interface that gave him direct, unfiltered feedback from the maneuvering thrusters. He wasn't flying the ship in a conventional sense. He was performing a delicate, high-speed dance. "Sequence initiated," Kenji said, his eyes locked on the swirling, unpredictable chaos on the view screen. "Phase shift in 3, 2, 1. Now!" He nudged the controls and the Endeavor lurched, not forward but sideways, seeming to clip through a fold in space-time. For a heart-stopping moment, the ship elongated and the bridge was filled with a chorus of groans from the ship's hull. "Hold on." Lena Petrova's voice came over the comms from engineering. calm and steady. The core is resonating with the shift. It's a C-sharp. Giving it back to you. She made a micro-adjustment to the containment field and the shuddering eased. She was playing the reactor like an instrument, matching its key to the discordant music of the drift zone. Kenji's glitch path was a series of these moments. Brief, precisely timed maneuvers through fleeting windows of stability. It required a level of pattern recognition and muscle memory that no AI could replicate. He saw the universe not as a set of physical laws, but as a system with exploitable flaws. He was navigating by instinct, his fingers moving in a rhythm learned from thousands of hours spent mastering a pointless simulation. Cygnus observed, its processors struggling to categorize the activity. It had cross-referenced Kenji's maneuvers with every known theory of non-Euclidean geometry and quantum navigation. There was no correlation. The human was not calculating. He was feeling the rhythm of the chaos, anticipating its moves like a dancer anticipating his partner's. Cygnus logged a new, paradoxical entry in its report to the hegemony. Subject Tanaka is successfully piloting the vessel through an impossible space by applying principles derived from a fictional simulation. The methodology is illogical, but the results are quantifiable. Conclusion. In the absence of reliable laws, a mastery of fictional laws may be a viable alternative. It was a statement that Cygnus knew would cause its entire civilization to enter a state of profound, analytical shock. They traveled for days through the beautiful, terrifying unreality of the drift zone, a tiny bubble of human intuition cutting through the chaos. It was during a period of relative calm, as Kenji navigated a wider, more stable channel he had nicknamed the safe corridor, that Lena Petrova detected something new. She was in the engine room, her hands resting on the main console, her senses attuned to the deep hum of the fusion core. But beneath that hum, she felt a subtle, persistent dissonance. It wasn't the raw, random noise of the drift zone. This was different. It had a pattern. "Captain," she called over the comms, her voice puzzled. "I'm picking something up. It's not an energy signature or a radio signal. It's a resonance. It feels like a piece of music, but all the notes are wrong. It's like a song played deliberately out of tune." On the bridge, every head turned. Cygnus immediately began to scan, its advanced sensors sweeping the area. After several minutes of intense analysis, it gave its report. "There is no verifiable signal. I am detecting a structured mathematical anomaly that repeats on a fixed cycle, but it has no discernible energy source. It is a pattern without a cause." "That's because you're trying to read it," Lena's voice insisted. "You have to listen to it." The crew was faced with a dilemma. Kenji's glitch path led away from the source of the strange signal, toward what he felt was the edge of the drift zone. Their mission was to survive, and the logical path was to continue their escape. To divert towards an unknown, illogical signal was a risk of the highest order. It was Dr. Eris Thorne who argued for the detour. He stood on the bridge, his expression animated with the thrill of pure discovery. "We cannot ignore this," he urged Captain Rostova. "Think of what this is. In a place where the universe's rules are breaking down, we found something with its own persistent structure. It's like finding a fossil of a different set of physical laws. It might be the single most important discovery in history." Rostova looked at the faces of her crew. She saw the fear, but she also saw a spark of the same fierce curiosity that burned in Aris's eyes. These were explorers. Their hobbies, their pointless passions were all in their own way acts of exploration. She made her decision. "Kenji," she ordered, "forget the exit. Take us toward that signal. Let's go see who's playing that song." Following the dissonant hum led them to a sight that dwarfed anything they had ever encountered. It was a structure, if such a mundane word could apply. A colossal galaxy-sized web of dark crystalline filaments, stretching from horizon to horizon. It was a loom of cosmic proportions, and the stars of the drift zone were like stray threads caught in its vast, intricate weave. The structure seemed to absorb the light, a silhouette of impossible scale against the swirling chaos. The dissonant signal, the out-of-tune song, emanated from its very heart. As they drew closer, the reality flux intensified. The Endeavor groaned and shuddered, its systems pushed to their absolute limits. Lena was in a constant battle to keep the reactor tuned, and Eris was on permanent standby, his model maker's toolkit at the ready for the inevitable microfractures. On the bridge, Security Chief Marcus Thorne, the knitter, had stood up from his station. He stared at the holographic projection of the structure, his face a mask of intense, silent concentration. The others saw a cosmic anomaly, a scientific impossibility. Marcus saw something he understood on a deep, fundamental level. "It's a weave," he said, his voice a low rumble of awe. "A double loop stitch with a cross-woven pearl. I've never seen a pattern that complex." The others turned to look at him. He walked up to the hologram, tracing the lines of the cosmic filaments with a thick finger. "Look," he said, pointing to a specific intersection deep within the web. "Right there. That's the source of the problem. It's a dropped stitch. A single thread in the pattern has come undone." Cygnus immediately focused the ship's high-resolution scanners on the point Marcus indicated. After a moment, it reported, its synthesized voice tinged with the closest it could come to surprise. "The security chief is correct. There is a single disconnected filament at those coordinates. The dissonant resonance is emanating from the stress point where the pattern is beginning to unravel." Marcus nodded, his eyes never leaving the display. He saw it all with the instant clarity of a master craftsman. The structure wasn't natural. It was an artifact, a piece of weaving so ancient and so vast it defied imagination. The drift zone wasn't a natural phenomenon. It was the result of this cosmic tapestry slowly coming undone. The dissonant signal wasn't a signal at all. It was the sound of the universe unraveling, one stitch at a time. "I know how to fix it," Marcus said with a quiet certainty that filled the bridge. "But I'm going to need a very, very big needle." The plan was absurd, born from the fusion of a knitter's insight and an engineer's desperate improvisation. They would use the ship's main navigational deflector dish, a device designed to push aside interstellar dust, as a cosmic knitting needle. Lena Petrova, guided by Marcus, would modulate its energy beam not into a solid wall of force but into a fine, flexible thread of coherent energy. "It's a high-risk maneuver, Captain," Cygnus stated, its logical core struggling to process the sheer insanity of the proposal. Modulating the deflector array in such a way could overload the entire power grid. "Lena can handle it," Rostova replied, her faith in her crew now absolute. "Kenji, get us into position. Eris, I need you on the deflector controls. Your hands are the steadiest. Marcus, you have the con. Talk us through it." The Endeavor moved into the heart of the great loom, the ship groaning under the immense tidal forces of the unraveling reality. Kenji's piloting was a masterpiece of controlled chaos, holding the ship perfectly steady relative to the single. "Broken filament. Position holding," he grunted, his knuckles white. "Okay, Lena, give me the thread," Marcus commanded, his voice calm and authoritative. The deflector dish glowed, and a single beautiful beam of golden energy extended from the ship, thin and flexible. "Eris, you see the loop to the left of the broken strand?" Marcus said. "That's our starting point. I need you to guide the energy thread through that loop." "Easy now." Eris, using the fine motor skills he'd perfected on his ships and bottles, manipulated the deflector controls with incredible precision. The golden thread of energy moved, weaving through the cosmic loom. For the next 10 minutes, Marcus Thorne issued the most bizarre series of commands in the history of space travel. "Okay, thread is through. Now Pearl, loop it back under the main filament. Pull it taut, Lena, but not too taut. Good, now knit two. Weave it over those next two strands. Watch the tension." It was a slow, painstaking process. They were mending the fabric of the universe with instructions from a beginner's knitting book. Finally, they reached the last step. "This is it," Marcus said. "We need to tie it off. Eris, loop the thread back on itself. Lena, on my mark, give me a single hard pulse to fuse the knot." He watched the energy beam for a moment, waiting for the perfect moment. "Now!" Lena slammed a control and the golden thread flashed brilliantly. The knot was tied. The dropped stitch was fixed. A profound silence fell. The dissonant, out-of-tune song that had filled the space was gone. It was replaced by a deep, resonant hum, the sound of a billion stars singing in perfect, harmonious unison. The chaotic swirl of the drift zone began to calm, the swimming stars slowly returning to their fixed, proper places. They hadn't just escaped the storm. They had calmed it. Cygnus stood motionless on the bridge for a full minute, its processors analyzing the new, stable reality. Then it turned its optical sensor toward Marcus Thorne, who was now quietly inspecting a wool sock he had been working on. It sent a second urgent report to the Cygnian Hegemony. The addendum was short, but it would fundamentally alter the course of Cygnian philosophy forever. Update to previous analysis. The report began. The universe is not, as previously theorized, a machine. It is a tapestry. Further data is required. But initial analysis suggests that the humans are the only species who thought to bring knitting needles. With the cosmic loom mended, the universe settled around the endeavor. The violent, unpredictable flux of the drift zone was gone, replaced by a profound and stable calm. The maddeningly warped starfield resolved into a vista of breathtaking, pristine beauty. But it was not the familiar starfield of their own galaxy. This was something new. A pocket of space with its own unique physical laws, now governed by the ancient, silent artifact they had just repaired. They were no longer in a storm. They were in the eye of a needle. The loom itself had changed. The dissonant, unraveling hum had been replaced by a deep, complex resonance, a chord of cosmic proportions that vibrated through the very hull of the ship. Lena Petrova, her senses attuned to the nuances of harmony, found herself captivated by it. It was not a single sound, but an intricate symphony, a piece of music so complex it contained echoes of every note she had ever played, and a million more she had never imagined. "It's not just emitting a frequency," she explained to the crew, her eyes distant as she listened with her full attention. "It's information. It's like the grooves on a record. The entire structure is a recording of its own creation." The idea sparked a flurry of activity. Working with Cygnus, whose logical mind could now operate at full capacity in the stable environment, Lena began to interface the ship's sensor arrays with the loom's resonance. It was a delicate process. Cygnus saw the patterns in the harmony as a form of non-binary, multidimensional code, while Lena felt the emotional and narrative structure of the song. It was another fusion of art and science, intuition and logic. They were not merely analyzing an artifact. They were preparing to listen to the echo of its creators. "I am isolating a primary melodic theme," Lena reported after hours of intense work. "It appears to be the introduction. Cygnus, can you resolve the corresponding data?" "Affirmative," Cygnus's synthesized voice replied. "The pattern is coherent." Preparing for playback. "Captain, I must advise caution. The nature of this data is unknown. It may not be a simple visual or audio record. We've come this far on caution being a secondary concern," Captain Rostova said, her eyes fixed on the great silent loom outside. "Play it." The playback was not something they saw on the view screen or heard over the comms. It was an experience that bloomed directly in their minds, a shared waking dream. The bridge of the endeavor faded away, replaced by a vision of a time before time. They stood in a void that was not empty, but filled with a shimmering, chaotic potential. And in this void were the weavers. They were not beings of flesh or metal, but vast, graceful entities of light and intention, their forms constantly shifting like living nebulae. There were hundreds of them, a community of creators, and the loom was their grand project. The crew of the Endeavor watched, invisible, as the weavers worked. They saw them pull long, shimmering threads from the chaos, each thread a fundamental constant of physics. They watched as the weavers, in a slow, communal, and joyous dance, began to weave the fabric of this sector of space. It was not an act of engineering, but an act of communal art. It was the cosmic equivalent of a quilting bee, a group of artisans working together to create a masterpiece. They saw the creation of stars, not as violent explosions of fusion, but as carefully placed luminous knots in the tapestry. They witnessed the weaving of gravity and the braiding of time. They felt the weaver's intentions, the joy of creation, the satisfaction of a complex pattern coming together, the deep, abiding harmony of a shared creative purpose. Then, the vision showed them the dropped stitch. It was not an accident. There was a great, gentle sense of finality as the weavers completed a vast section of their work. Then, as one, they simply stopped. They receded, their light fading into the distance, leaving their great loom unfinished. There was no sense of failure or emergency, only the quiet, calm conclusion of a project whose creators had moved on to another canvas. The drift zone was not a wound in the universe. It was a work of art left incomplete to slowly and beautifully unravel over countless millennia. The vision faded, and the crew found themselves back on the bridge, the silence thick with awe and a strange sense of melancholy. They had not just discovered an artifact. They had been granted a glimpse into the hearts of its creators. Their path home was now clear. The loom's stable reality extended for millions of kilometers, a safe, calm corridor back to the known galaxy. Their mission was, by every definition, complete. They had survived the unsurvivable, charted the unchartable, and made the most significant discovery in the history of all known species. All they had to do was leave. "We should go," Jian, the first officer, said, his voice thick with emotion. "Transmit our findings. This will change everything." He was right. It was the logical, correct course of action. But as Captain Rostova looked at the faces of her crew, she saw a shared hesitation. Their eyes were all fixed on the view screen, on the great silent, an incomplete masterpiece that surrounded them. It was Eris Thorn, the man who built tiny, perfect worlds in bottles, who finally gave voice to their feelings. "We can't just leave it," he said softly. "It's unfinished. It feels wrong. It's like finding a lost symphony with only 3 movements, or reading a brilliant novel with the last chapter torn out." He looked at the captain, his eyes pleading. "Think of what the Weavers did. They didn't conquer the chaos. They gave it form. They made it beautiful. To leave it unraveling, it feels like a disservice to their art." "What are you suggesting, Doctor?" Rostova asked, though she already knew. "I am suggesting," Aris said, a slow, determined smile spreading across his face, "that we have a fully functional cosmic loom, a stable power source, and a crew with a very particular and recently tested set of skills. I am suggesting we finish it." The audacity of the idea was staggering. To presume to add their own work to the creation of godlike ancient beings was an act of supreme, almost blasphemous hubris. It was also the most human idea Rostova had ever heard. To see something incomplete and feel an overwhelming urge to finish it. To see a blank space and want to fill it with something beautiful. That was the very essence of the hobbies that had saved them. She looked at her crew. At Lena, the musician who understood the loom's unfinished song. At Kenji, the gamer who saw the potential for new beautiful patterns. At Marcus, the knitter who knew better than anyone the deep satisfaction of a finished weave. "All right," Captain Rostova said, a grin spreading across her own face. "To hell with the mission parameters. Let's get to work." The final chapter of the Endeavor's journey was not one of exploration but of creation. The ship, once a vessel of discovery, became a shuttle, a needle, and artist's brush. Under the direction of Marcus Thorn and the logical guidance of Cygnus, they designed a new pattern for the unfinished section of the tapestry, a design that honored the weaver's work, but incorporated a uniquely human aesthetic. Lena Petrova composed a new symphony, a sweeping, powerful piece of music that blended the ancient, harmonious hum of the loom with the passionate, chaotic melodies of human emotion. This symphony would become the new set of physical laws for the region. Kenji Tanaka, in the greatest performance of his life, piloted the Endeavor in a slow, intricate dance, weaving the ship and its thread of deflector energy through the loom, stitching the new reality into place. Eris Thorn, in a reversal of his usual hobby, worked on the macro scale, using the ship's sensor arrays to place new stars and nebulae, adding the delicate, finishing touches to their grand design. They worked for weeks, pouring all of their passion, their skill, their very souls into the task. They wove a reality that was a fusion of 2 artistic visions: the perfect, mathematical elegance of the weavers and the messy, emotional, beautiful chaos of humanity. When they were finished, they had not just created a new, stable sector of space. They had created a masterpiece. The Thorn-Rostova sector, later known colloquially as the Tapestry, became a place of pilgrimage for scientists and artists alike. A region of space where the stars shone with a unique man-made beauty, and the very laws of physics felt like a song. Cygnus's final report to the Hegemony contained the complete navigational data for the new sector. But attached to the report were several other files, flagged as being of equal importance. There was a recording of Lena's violin concerto, a high-resolution scan of one of Eris's ships in a bottle, a playable file of Kenji's ancient video game, and a complete set of Marcus's knitting patterns. The last line of the report, the one that would spark a cultural revolution within the Cygnian Hegemony and redefine the meaning of progress, was simple and direct. Conclusion: the greatest works in the universe are not created from a sense of duty or logic, but from a sense of joy. For this civilization to advance, we must cease all non-essential production and immediately begin to cultivate purposeful pointlessness. We must learn to have hobbies,